Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Palo Alto, where we come to transform ourselves and each other and the world. It is so good to be together on this Easter morning. Through most of the service, the host will have us all muted, but there are a couple times in the service where we want to unmute and be able to hear one another's voices, and this is one of those times. Let's unmute right now and just say hello, welcome, happy Easter to the folks around us.
Happy Easter.
Good morning. Happy Easter.
Easter.
Hello.
Happy Easter.
Easter.
Easter and bye-bye.
Hello.
Hello.
Out of here.
You'll see lots of announcements. All right, we'll hear from everybody.
They did. They were.
For our cheerfully chaotic coffee hour, when we will again unmute ourselves after the service. You can see the order of service by following the link in the chat. Greg will post links that you need periodically for anybody who's come in, so just keep following that. And of course, I'll also announce what's going on in the service. I want to tell you a couple other things that are going on right now. Kids, there is a virtual egg hunt during this service. How many colored eggs can you find? How many times can you hear the word egg? Check with your friends in Sunday school about how many eggs you found in the virtual egg hunt. Keep your eyes wide open. I have one last announcement from your stewardship committee. Next week is our annual meeting, and they have some things they want to tell you. Dear UUCPA, we want you to know how inspiring and successful this budget drive has been. Our grand total right now is $518,645 from 182 pledgers, which is almost 94% of the way to our original goal. This is pretty astounding, given the circumstances we've been operating under in the past month. You've been extraordinarily generous in an extraordinary time. Our volunteer finance committee and board members have worked hard to put together a budget that is both fiscally conservative and reflective of our values. Please attend the annual meeting next week after the second service, which of course you can do via Zoom, to participate in our democratic process and understand how these funds bring our vision and ministry to life. Remember, it's never too late to pledge. Just write the amount you plan to give in an email to pledge@uucpa.org. And thank you from your stewardship team. There are lots of adult and children's classes, small groups, and other activities happening online. Please visit the What's Happening page on our website to see what's coming up this week. And now, let us begin our Easter service. Thank you so much to Liz and Veronika and everybody who did so much to bring us music and other features of our service from far away and different rooms. So beautiful. We light our chalice this morning with the words of the Reverend Sam Trumbore. If you have a chalice there at home, please add your light to this one. O light of life, be kindled again in our hearts as we meet together this morning to celebrate the joy of human community, seeking a wholeness that extends beyond ourselves. With our centering words each week, we draw on one of the sources of our living tradition. With Passover this week, many celebrate the Exodus, the escape from Egypt in which the ancestors of the Jews were freed from slavery. Our centering words come from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav from 19th century Ukraine. The Exodus from Egypt occurs in every person, in every era, in every year, and in every day. Let us follow the sound of the bell into silence and arrive fully in this sacred time that we create through being in one another's presence. Bruce will now lead us in singing O Life That Maketh All Things New. The words are in the order of service and the chat.
Life that maketh all things new, the blooming earth, the thoughts within, our pilgrim feet wet with the dew, in gladness hither turn again. From hand to hand the greeting flows, from eye to eye the signals run, from heart to heart the bright hope flows, the seekers of the light are one. The freer step, the fuller breath, the wide horizon's grander view, the sense of life that knows no death, the life that maketh all things new.
Martha, I just heard what happened to that rabbi, Jesus, the one that your brother Peter went to Jerusalem with so that they could celebrate Passover there.
Those terrible Romans. I can't believe that they put Jesus to death. For no reason at all, as near as I can tell.
They say that the Romans are trying to claim that Jesus' death is the fault of us Jews, which is crazy talk, because Jesus was Jewish just like us. But they say this is all a plot by the Romans to tighten their grip on our country, Judea.
If you say so. All I know is that I'm worried about my brother Peter. When Jesus got arrested by the Romans, Peter was with him. Then the Romans questioned him. And to save his life, Peter had to say that he didn't really know Jesus.
I'm sure it made Peter feel bad to say that. But in my opinion, your brother did the right thing. Those Romans are mean and cold-hearted. That's why I was hoping Jesus was going to lead people in a rebellion against the Romans.
Well, there's no chance of that now. The Romans made sure of that by putting Jesus to death 3 days ago.
But they say that Jesus didn't really die. I mean, he died, but then they say he came back to life.
Where did you hear that?
Everyone in the marketplace is talking about it. 2 women went to find his body after the Sabbath was over, because of course you can't bury someone on the Sabbath. And Jesus' body was gone. He must have risen from the dead.
Don't believe everything you hear in the marketplace. Here's what probably happened. After Jesus was arrested, his followers, like my brother, hid out wherever they could to escape from the Romans. Someone else buried Jesus and wasn't able to tell everybody.
But I heard it from a friend who knew someone who had a friend who was actually there. And that person actually talked with Jesus after he died, so it must be true.
Well, some people want Jesus to be alive to help us rebel against the Romans. Some people want Jesus to be alive so he can keep preaching. But I think Jesus was just teaching us to follow the Shema, love God with all our hearts. And what it says in Leviticus, love our neighbors as ourselves.
But they say Jesus walked on water. They say that Jesus turned water into wine. He must have risen from the dead.
What I want to remember about Jesus is that he was kind to everyone, even people who were poor or sick or who followed a different religion. I don't really care whether he rose from the dead, but I do want to try to be as good a person as he was.
What will happen next in the Judean village? Will the Romans crack down? What about Peter? What about Martha? What about Ishmael? Tune in next week, same time, same channel.
If you have joys or sorrows to share, you can share them still by sending them to joyconcern@uucpa.org or post them in the chat box provided by Zoom, and they will be shared aloud. I'm afraid I can't see the Zoom, the Facebook Live chat box, but send it to Zoom or email it directly to me at joyconcern@uucpa.org, and I will share. We have a great joy from the Berry family that Elizabeth was accepted to many doctoral programs for clinical psychology to work with children in helping build resiliency in trauma. What wonderful work, Elizabeth. Secondly, during the coronavirus outbreak, she is working part-time at Safeway Bakery to take pressure off of vulnerable workers. Barbara Smith Thomas shares sadly that her oldest and dearest friend, Sue Margulis, is in intensive care in Memphis with pneumonia. It is responding slowly to antibiotics, so it probably isn't COVID-19, but the coronavirus test came back inconclusive. So they have to keep her in the coronavirus ICU, not where you want to be. She is 67 with many underlying conditions. So please keep her in your thoughts and prayers, and we will keep you in our thoughts and prayers as well, Barbara. Here's a joy from the nominating committee, and it is a great joy about our community. Castor, who's the chair of that committee, wanted to thank all the volunteers sustaining UUCPA, in particular those serving as officers, for their time and energy. As we come up to the end of the fiscal year, as a member of a nominating committee, he wants to thank those who've agreed to take on new responsibilities for UUCPA by running for election to the Board of Trustees. Brooke Bashara, Dave Jokey, Emma Grant-Beer, Greg Williams, and Maria Almley. And there's also folks running for the nominating committee, Elsa Schaefer and Weijia Chang. Thank you so much. We can't name all the volunteers who've been keeping this place as vibrant as ever during the pandemic. But you are all so invaluable, and thanks so much for everybody who's working right up front and behind the scenes. Penelope and Savannah share they're happy it's Easter. Don't know which of you typed that, but I'm sure you're both happy it's Easter, and happy Easter to everybody. Are there other joys and concerns to share? In that case, let's take a moment of prayer, meditation, to just sit in silence and feel the deep concerns, sorrow over a sick friend, the great joys to be in this community of love and support, to have Easter, to have wonderful work helping children and people who are at risk from the coronavirus, and all the other joys and sorrows that go unspoken and are so dear to our hearts. So please join me now in singing "Lo, the Easter Tide is Here." The words are in your order of service and the chat, and Bruce will lead us.
Lo, the Easter tide is here, festival of hope and cheer. At the south wind's genial breath, nature wakes from seeming death. Seasons come and seasons go, time moves on in ceaseless flow. But within our being hides that which through all change abides. And for this we joyful raise Easter songs of joy and praise. In the love which holds all power shines life's glory evermore.
We now have a reflection from Mark Freeman Williams.
On August 10th, 2006, I waved goodbye to a truck full of our Austin, Texas apartment contents and headed to the airport to fly to California. Kristen, my wife, was already there. We'd been married in June, gone on a lovely honeymoon to Fiji, and then she headed to California to start translation school. I stayed behind to oversee the packing and closing up of all the apartment-related items. 3 months before, I had been offered a choice: move to the Bay Area and work at the headquarters of my company, or accept a layoff package. Already planning our wedding, we decided it would be a good time to try a new place and test setting down roots as a married couple. Almost 14 years and 2 children later, it's time to pull up those roots and return to Austin. I recently accepted a position there, and we plan to move by the end of June. While it's certainly the right decision for our family, it's also bittersweet. But as winter turns to spring and new things grow, so does my hope for our new home in an old place. But I go different than I came, and much of that change is through connection with this congregation, this church. So I hope you'll indulge me a minute with memories of our time here, but also use those memories as a way to jog your memory and consider ways that you can contribute to the connection in this congregation. One of my earliest distinct memories is of the main hall, my now 11-year-old as an infant as the baby Jesus. The fact that the baby Jesus was a girl reinforced my feeling that this was the right church for me. 6 years later, our second child participated as the reason for the very pregnant Mary going across the stage. She was born less than a week later. And because of those young children, we found our way to Parent Journey with so many people that I still consider friends. And talking about the ways you have to teach your child helped me feel more confident as a new father. And it's a gift that continues to give as the girls grow and as Parent Journey has renewed and started again. So fast forward to our first Bass Lake getaway, and letting the then 6-year-old run off unsupervised with a minister's child, one of my first tastes of free-range, trusting parenting. Bass Lake also helped me deepen my connection with many of the members of the church, especially those that were not of the cohort that had young children. Sadly, one of the things that I love and I'm missing today is the Easter egg hunt, with its focus on making sure the youngest members of our community find eggs and giving the older children the opportunity to participate and lead a fun activity for all ages. Here's hoping you got to hunt for eggs while sheltering in place. Most recently, I've had the opportunity to serve on the Committee on Ministry, where we think deeply about the ways in which this church ministers to ourselves, each other, and the world. In fact, I hope you will join me and the committee for the April 26th worship service as we reflect on these themes and help Amy celebrate 20 years of ministry. It has been a true privilege to be a servant leader on that committee, and I will miss it terribly. Finally, it is one of the joys in my life to have been invited to be a worship associate, sharing of myself in these reflections. I thank Reverend Amy for that opportunity. If you had told me 12 years ago that I would one day be a worship leader for an entire service, I would have laughed. It has been truly transformative for me, and I recommend talking to her if there's that spark of ministry in your soul. So I leave here as a better member of my church. I take the things that I have learned as scions to graft with other congregations. But I hope that what I have shared continues to support you in your journey and this church in its service to the wider community. Blessed be.
Our reading is from Isaiah 43, verse 19. I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Now we have the UUCPA choir singing Salvation is Created by composer Pavel Chesnikov. This performance was recorded at the Singing Our Truth concert on May 7th, 2017. Often the conversation about Easter seems to focus on questions like, did Jesus really come back to life? Did he go on living with God after he died here on earth? And what about us? Do we live on in some other realm after we die in this world? With all respect to those who find these questions fascinating, I don't think that they are as important an Easter question as this one. How can we make the most of the one life we know for certain we have? This one that we are living right now. In the tradition that Jesus followed, Isaiah, who was considered the greatest of prophets and poets, told his people that God said that verse I shared before. I am about to do a new thing. I will make a way in the wilderness, a road through the wild. I will make rivers in the desert places. All of us at some point find ourselves in the wilderness of loneliness, the desert of illness, the barren lands of depression and discouragement, the rocky places where our hearts break and our dreams seem to dry up. And when something or someone helps us to make a way where there didn't seem to be a way, we are doing what we sang of in our hymn, like nature waking from seeming death. We're making life emerge where it seemed there was only death. You know, life is so stubborn, it's tenacious, it's creative. It does a new thing where a new thing is called for. And here's a picture, and I'm going to show you many pictures to show you what I mean. At some point in this tree's life, the tree that you can see there on your screen, it was kept from growing straight up toward the sun. Even though it wasn't growing the way trees are supposed to grow, it kept growing branches, sending its roots down deep to hold it tight, using some branches to give its heavy, tilted trunk extra support. You can see it's leaning on them there. It kept growing plentiful leaves to keep turning light into more life. Growing like this was not the plan, but this tree found a way. This tree grew straight for many years, it looks like, but something cracked its trunk and knocked it right over. Many branches were sheared off. The ones that remained were growing sideways, orienting the leaves the wrong way. They began to grow toward the light instead. Its injury is always going to show. It will never have the shape it once had, but it thrives. These trees have quite a story to tell. They started out life among many other trees and bushes and grasses, among the buildings in the city of Minamisoma, Japan. And then the land on which they grew was flooded so deeply by the tsunami that struck eastern Japan in March of 2011 that almost no house in Minamisoma could be seen above the surface of the waters. The incredible force of the Pacific Ocean carried away cars and trucks and boulders and whole buildings. When the tsunami receded, these two trees remained. They live now in a very different landscape than the one in which they started life. But like the people who are rebuilding a life in Minamisoma, here they are. They're living, they're growing. Sometimes new life emerges even when all seems lost. This tree was cut down utterly. It was left with nothing more than a stump right here. But life, stubborn life, kept stirring with the roots and the stump of the trunk, putting forth many new trunks. And here's a tree that was felled and remained where it fell. The branches that once sprouted leaves and reached for the sun lie flat now. They lie along the ground. So the life within it began to send new instructions. Grow straight out from the old branches. Grow up toward the sun and make a new shape. Never mind how trees are supposed to grow. Life demands a different way. And here it is. Sometimes the end of one life gives rise to a different kind of being altogether. This redwood tree was reduced to a stump and an acorn took root in its flesh. If you're thinking those leaves don't look like redwood tree leaves, you're right. Now it's a beautiful oak tree that's growing there. It has been given birth and food by the redwood as it rots away. And just as the redwood is giving the oak life, the oak is giving the redwood a new life. Now we all know that to live, trees need to pull up water through their roots and spread their leaves or needles to receive light and exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. They need soil and air and light and water, but sometimes the roots are moving along through the soil and they hit solid rock. This tree's roots found their way around the boulder that they hit. They just kept seeking and persisting until they found what they needed. Sometimes life begins in a place that is not very suitable to that life at all. The seed for this tree fell on a fence post. Most such seeds will just rot away and not grow, but this one did. It grew. It broke down the wood of the fence post enough to make what it needed and grow into a young tree. This seed landed on a rock. And so did this one. They must have found nothing there but a tiny pocket of soil, just enough to hold a sprouting seed. And then their own fallen leaves made more earth as they rotted away. And that held the water and nurtured the roots and created a tiny ecosystem able to sustain a very stubborn, determined life. The way of life is to find a way, to take non-living matter and turn it into its own ongoing, growing, searching, creating being. It doesn't always succeed. Many seeds fail. And everything that lives will one day die. But in between, a life can trace new roots into air and soil and build a sculpture molecule by molecule. And a life that starts with so little to sustain it, that is trying to make life out of rock, can still grow into something as beautiful as this. Sometimes where we are planted is just far from ideal. It's just the crack in a boulder. Or how about this tree that grows growing in a sheet of basalt? Trees have so little control over where they grow. They are stuck wherever the seed fell, where they first take root. And these trees persisted. Maybe the petrified trunk of another tree is not where this tree would have chosen to start life. But 100 years or so later, here they both are. The once living tree that died and turned into stone, and those unliving materials now grown into a living, thriving tree. Sometimes we start out in a great place. Everything starts out fine and life goes on pretty much as expected for a long time until it hits an obstacle that just won't budge. And we just have to grow around it, the way this tree grew around a fence. And this one was planted close to a leaflet box and it just grew around the box and the box's pole. And this one grew around a log. Sometimes where we're planted doesn't seem to be designed to nurture life at all, but life is stubborn. It's tenacious. It keeps trying. And sometimes, planted in these unlikely places, we thrive. And we become something extraordinarily graceful, with a beauty that's unexpected, unpredictable, and shaped to this new environment. Now, we humans are very different from trees in lots of ways, but in some ways, we're not so different. We don't put together a life just on our own. We grow out of others' creations. We twist and turn to fit ourselves around what other people have decided. And sometimes the result is a kind of collaborative art made from our tenacity, the way this tree and this shrine in Kathmandu, Nepal, make a beautiful work together. And sometimes that art is created out of our impulse to seek out whatever will bring life, the way a tree will send its roots wherever they need to go. If they don't find soil, they take water from what runs down a building's walls. If they can't get the water there, they may take it from the air, just until they can get where they need to be. We need certain things in order to live. We may have a long list in mind. I know my list of things that I think I need is far longer than a tree's simple list of air, soil, water, sun. And just when we think we don't have what we need, we might be surprised by the spirit of life. It's stronger than we think. It's more flexible. It's more creative. It makes a way where there appeared to be no way. It hits a lot of dead ends. And the twisted shapes that it makes when it's thwarted and has to find a new way through, a new way through, a new way around, like this one had to find a way around the solid rock of the temple. These shapes, they're beautiful. Months of being housebound were probably not in our plans. We thought we would have more room for all the things we wanted to do. We thought we would have time to gather together and carry out the plans that we had back in February. What would it look like just to burst forth within the strict bounds that hold us? Maybe it would look something like this. I think if trees think, if they have an ought to in their minds, this one probably thought it ought to have soil at its roots and an open sky above, not a roof. It would have said, trees don't grow in buildings. But given only a building to grow in, a floor to grow on, and a roof overhead, it grew. Trees don't grow in cars. They just don't. It's impossible. Even without quarantine, we can feel as if we have outgrown the space in which we started out. We want to move and expand, and everything around us at times just seems to want to hold us back. I think maybe that's how this tree felt. Its roots were growing and expanding, and it came upon this hard, thick roof of brick, and it just kept on going. And maybe this one had to summon all the stubborn, unyielding force of life to grow beyond the space that it was given. I mean, how daunting to be sending out your roots and come up against a huge, heavy slab of cement, caught between cement below and cement above, and it just kept going. Some trees' roots find good soft soil, and their branches grow wide and free under the open sky of a vast field, and their leaves spread beautifully and provide the only shelter for miles around. Everything is going wonderfully well. And then one terrible night, thunder crashes so loudly it shakes the air and strikes and splits them right open. And nothing will ever be the same again. What do they do then? This tree offers one answer. Sometimes the earth into which they put their roots wears away bit by bit, and then faster and faster, worn by water and wind, and they're left high and dry, but still growing. If these trees had plans, then life was what happened while they were busy making them. And life said, there are other ways to thrive. There are other ways for you to be beautiful. After the ground itself has been knocked from under us, I, life, continue, it says. And more than that, I take the dry brown earth and I make the most exuberant green. Here is what one of the Bible stories of Jesus' death tells us. When his follower, Mary Magdalene, went to the tomb, she found that Jesus' body was gone. She was so upset. Not only was her teacher, her friend, dead, but she couldn't even give him a respectful burial. And then she saw someone standing by the tomb. She thought maybe it was the gardener, and she asked him if he had moved the body. Then he called her by her name, and she realized that the person before her was Jesus. I just love that idea that Jesus is a gardener. A gardener helps things to grow. She takes land that is harsh and makes a way for things to live there. They take dry soil and water it as if bringing a river to a desert. I think what happened on Good Friday and what continued to be true on Easter is that Jesus died, as everyone does. But I also think that by the way he lived, he showed us that when we are in situations that don't seem to support life as we expected it to be, or don't seem to support life at all, there is still a way. We aren't lone plants struggling on our own. There are gardeners to help us, teachers and friends, and always around us and through us and within us, the spirit of life, if we will follow it. And now let us receive the offering by which we support our vision in the world. You can follow the QR code there in your order of service or the link from the chat. Please use the memo line to say whether this is an offering for the collection or whether you're paying a part of your pledge. If you're attending our services for the first time, you're our guest. Please skip the offering with a clear conscience and just listen to the beautiful music that Liz and Veronika are making for us. let us sing together. Sun don't set in the morning. The lyrics are in the chat and the online order of service, and Bruce will once again lead us in singing.
Sun don't set in the morning, sun don't set in the morning, Lord. Sun don't set in the morning, light shine round the world. Sing on, keep on singing, sing on, keep on singing, sing on, keep on singing, light shine round the world. Sun don't set in the morning, sun don't set in the morning, Lord. Sun don't set in the morning, light shine round the world. March on, keep on marching, march on, keep on marching, march on, keep on marching, light shine round the world. Sun don't set in the morning, sun don't set in the morning, Lord. Sun don't set in the morning, light shine round the world. Dance on, keep on dancing, dance on, keep on dancing, dance on, keep on dancing, light shine round the world. Sun don't set in the morning, sun don't set in the morning, Lord. Sun don't set in the morning, light shine round the world. Pray on, keep on praying, pray on, keep on praying, pray on, keep on praying, light shine round the world. Sun don't set in the morning, sun don't set in the morning, Lord. Sun don't set in the morning, light shine round the world.
O light that maketh all things new, be with us and bless us. The seekers of the light are one.
Sturm werden wir uns in die Augen schauen und auf uns sinkt des Schweigen.
I invite everybody now to go ahead and be unmuted, have your video on so we can say the words of our benediction together.
Whoa.
To one another. The words are here in your chat and your order of service. Go out into the world
in peace.
be of good
Of good courage.
Hold fast
to what is good.
Turn no one
For
evil.
evil.
in the faint-hearted.
Then the faint-hearted. Weak.
Support the weak.
Help the suffering. Rejoice in beauty.
Rejoice in beauty.
Speak love with word and deed.
Honor all
Honor
beings.
all beings.
Well, it's because everybody's on different speeds.